Finance Committee meeting of February 26th. And just a reminder, in accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, I'd like to advise everyone that the meeting is being recorded and broadcast over Lunenburg Public Access. And there is a rebroadcast schedule. I read that the other night. And we are on Channel 8 on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 a.m., Fridays at 6 p.m., and Saturday and Sunday at 7 p.m. And the broadcast can also be viewed on YouTube. Before we get started, do we have any public comment? None. I do have a couple of announcements. I want to repeat an announcement from Tuesday evening. The Lunenburg Planning Board is holding a public hearing on March 9th, 2015 at 6:35 p.m. right here in this room to amend the protective bylaw of the town of Lunenburg by adding a section 4.0 use regulations, a new section entitled section 4.17 Village Center District Bylaw, to add to section 3.1 entitled Types of Districts, a new subsection 3.1.0 to read as follows: Village Center District. In section 3.2.1, delete the words May 3rd, 2008, and substitute the words May 2nd, 2015. To amend section 4.16, registered marijuana dispensaries, to correct numbering sequence, and to amend the zoning map to include Village Center District. Copies are on file in the planning office. And then one other announcement from the Board of Selectmen's office, the annual town report for fiscal year 2014. This is addressed to all department heads, boards, committees, and school departments. From Elaine Peterson, Executive Assistant to the Town Manager. 2014 Annual Report. Please submit your reports as soon as possible. And then there are some instructions as to the format. In years past, we have not made a submission to the annual town report. We have our annual budget letter, which accompanies the warrant for annual town meeting. In one year, I think it was 2012, we did try to compile a report. The difficulty is calendar year versus fiscal year and where we are in the cycle, and whether it's meaningful or not for us to make a separate submission. We put a lot of work into the budget in the spring, and we have our annual budget letter that goes out with the warrant. And in past years, we've said that that was sufficient. If it would please the committee, I'd like to continue that practice.
It's a great tradition.
Okay.
You were just afraid we were going to ask.
It's all yours.
Next item on the agenda is town manager updates. Kerry can't be with us this evening. She's actually at a meeting of the Neshoba Valley Regional Dispatch Center this evening. So for tonight, we have police and fire. And first up, we have Chief Jim Marino.
Thank you for having me tonight. I'm going to speak to the budget in as much as what we requested, what the town manager eventually recommended, and what the gaps are. And so, just move through. Let me first start by just introducing our table of organization. We have three divisions. We have the administrative division, which includes the chief of police, the public safety coordinator, and then we have the operations division, which is run by the lieutenant, second in command, the detective unit, the traffic canine unit, desk officer, and he's has command over the Reserve Police Department. And then we have patrol with 4 sergeants, or 3 sergeants rather, and 6 patrol officers. I'll speak a little bit about our mission statement, but I believe that it's defined more in depth in the budget itself. And as I go along, I'm going to talk more about how the budget affects our mission. And as you see in the first line of our mission, that we'd like to emphasize personal service and community problem resolution. And as you see as we go along, that's really what we prioritize, and that's really what we depend upon a sufficient amount of money to meet our mission. So studies have shown that 90% of our time is spent just handling service calls, and then 10% combating crime. And this goes along with our mission. You know, the police today are more concerned with conflict resolution and quality of life issues as they became more relevant in this type of policing. Modern policing involves the community to solve root causes of crime. Modern police officers frequently engage in proactive problem solving and crime prevention activities. It's for those reasons that policing requires that much more emphasis on training in areas such as interpersonal skills, ethnic diversity, and alcohol awareness. Domestic violence is an issue that is prevalent today. So one of the items I asked for in my budget this year is an item that we've had in the past. It's been funded in the past, and it's under the buzzword community policing. And I say that it's a buzzword because really what community policing is just the police getting together with the community to solve problems. That's what we should be doing. Some of the initiatives that we undertake are on the screen are the Teen Center Fun Run, Miles for Miles 5K, the Little League Parade, the Bonfire Homecoming. We provide extra patrols on holidays such as the 4th of July and Thanksgiving Eve and New Year's Eve. And we try to have an officer at the Christmas tree lighting and high school graduations and the Halloween patrols. We have to put out extra people on Halloween. We have an open house at the Public Safety Building every year, so we like to have police officers on hand for that. And then another example of that is, I believe it's biannually, we have a DEA drug buyback program, which we assign a police officer to the station to take in drugs. And those are just some examples of what we do in terms of extra police service to the community. We asked for $5,000 to cover some of that this year. We use most of that, and I didn't mention that in this list, but a lot of that's used to patrol the lakes in the boat. This past year, the Lake Shirley Association was kind enough to donate some of their money to hire police officers to perform patrols on Lake Shirley. And as a matter of fact, Shady Point also donated money to the Lake Shirley Association, which was used to hire police officers to patrol the lake. But that being said, I believe we spent about $3,800 in patrols. So that pretty much would have wiped out most of this 5,000 had we had it last year. So we asked for 5,000, and the town manager recommended to give us 3,500 towards that item. If we do in fact get that at town meeting, I'm sure we'll go through it, and most of it will be to patrol lakes. Last year, we weren't even able to patrol Whalen Lake because we just didn't have the money to do it. And obviously, the money we did get came from the Lake Shirley Association, so we had to commit our resources to that lake. And some of the other initiatives we took out of another account, and I'm going to get into that in a second. And that's this account here. it used to be called the ODD account, but I'm going to change that. I don't like the acronym. I think it's confusing. I don't want anything in my budget to be called odd anyway, but I think it's confusing because it actually stands for off-duty detail. Now, I don't know, I'm not sure where that came from, but nobody's off-duty when they're getting that kind of money. It's not a detail. A detail is extra duty that's paid by outside contractors, not the town, typically. There are some town details, but typically those are paid by private industry. Anyways, the account's been funded at the same level for many years. And last year's actuals finished at, and this is in question, I'm not sure why, but it was around 27,889. I have another figure, and it might have been because something was posted late at 28,076. This year, we anticipated to go to $30,000, and as a matter of fact, as of last December 20th, we're already at 16,805, and we're not halfway through the year yet. So we anticipate this account's going to go to $30,000. So that we asked for $30,000. The town manager's recommendation was $20,000. So that gap is $10,000, and that's something that we find essential. And again, I'll go over some of the reasons why or what we've done with some of that money. That money is for investigations over and above your 8 hours of work, and that happens frequently. And what happens is, it may be something as simple as a car accident that happens at 2:35, and we have 2 guys committed at a car accident. The 3 o'clock shift comes in, and those 2 people are tied up. They have to have help from the 3 o'clock shift to go down there to help them with traffic so that they can investigate the accident. So now comes 3 o'clock, and then 4 o'clock maybe by the time they're done, so they get paid extra money. And that has to come out of this ODD account. It can't come out of the overtime account, because the overtime account is what pays for them to go on vacation and take personal days and so forth. So that comes out of the field services account. There's some examples here on the screen of some of the things that we've already spent money on. And again, we didn't have the CP money, so some of the CP items end up on the field services and investigative account. We've had to, and you'll see a lot of it's traffic, and what that means is somebody get held over. Somebody get held over on arrest. They arrested somebody, they had to stay for the reports. We require that arrest reports are done before they leave the building, because we need to have them to follow the body to the court. So if they're not done, if it's a late arrest, late in their shift, they have to stay after to complete that. The drug task force takes up some of this money. Other reasons you can see there, we always put somebody on extra in during a storm, and that's been even this past spring, I believe, we had that semi-tornado or microburst go through town, and we had to put extra people on. We had roads closed everywhere, trees down everywhere, and so on and so forth. So we had to hire extra people, and that's what this account's all about. And I'm going to come back to that in a little while, because when I show you my workload analysis, you're going to say, well, how do you cover the extra hours? And it's going to come back to this investigative and field services account. Training is another issue. The Mass General Law, Chapter 4196, says that police officers have to attend an in-service training program after graduating from the police academy. The MPTC, the Mass Police Training Committee, has mandated 40 hours of in-service training this year. Now, this mandate came before July 1st, before the fiscal year kicked in this year. It had been 32 last year, then it got kicked up to 40. So we've had to try to fit that into our budget this year to try to get everybody trained. If they're not trained, they can be subject to dismissal if they don't attend in-service training up to 40 hours or 5 days. We have 14 full-time police officers, and presently we have, I know Kerry had said 16 the other day, but we really only have about 12 now. We've had some leave in the past couple of months. So the reserve officers have to be trained at that 40-hour mandate as well, even though the 4196B says every police officer on a full-time basis. The Supreme Court comes in behind them and says, in case law, that police officers have to be trained, and that the absence of training can be used to impeach their credibility in court. There's also tort suits against the town under US 1983 because we failed to train police officers. And of course, in this day and age, given what's going on in the press, you know, that issue is really surfaced hard. So, you know, we're really sensitive about training. And we use reserve officers in the exact same capacity as full-time officers. As a matter of fact, when we hire them, my policy is, and this is my policy, is that they cannot get in a police car. Now, this is after they've gone through their training, through the basic police academy for reserve officers. They cannot get in a police officers or in a police vehicle unless they've done 250 hours of field training on their own time, without being paid. They don't get paid for that. They have to come in and they have to ride with a full-time police officer for 250 hours. And we have a program where all of that training is documented. What they did, what they learned, how many hours they spent in a police car, and so on and so forth. And that's all done to protect the town against any liability, and it's also done so that their credibility in court won't be impeached. We can present that as evidence that they've been trained. So they essentially fall under the same mandates that we do because they do exactly the same job. Some of the, this year, as a matter of fact, this year I just put up some of the curriculum from the MPTC that they're requiring as part of this 40 hours training. And every year it's legal issues. And legal issues includes updates on criminal and constitutional as well as motor vehicle law. We have to have that every year. It changes constantly. This year there's a class that are mandated to take in human trafficking, police interactions with persons with mental illness, and defensive tactics, and we have yet to get to that class, and we may not get to defensive tactics until June, because I'm going to have, as I said, we weren't budgeted for 40 hours. We weren't really even budgeted for the 32-hour mandate last year. So I'm going to try to put it in at the end of the year, and then once we get into July, I'm going to have to use some of the new budget to pay for the rest of defensive tactics. And, you know, it just so happens this year, defensive tactics is not only 8 hours, it's 12, because we're required to recertify on a baton and on OC, which is the pepper spray. It just so happens every 2 years you have to do that. This is the year coming up that it has to be done. And again, you know, there's a liability issue. Somebody hits somebody with a baton and I can't say that they were trained, the town's going to be in trouble, and so on I, for that matter. CPR, first aid, and firearms. CPR is mandated every 2 years, and I'll show you when we get into the budget that there's probably a little bit of a question how we ended up at what we did in terms of the gap. Or no, actually, well, there was a gap, and we were able to resolve that. And it might look confusing to you, and I'll explain that when I get there. CPR is every 2 years, and now they're allowing us to factor it into that 40-hour mandate. So it's not going to be separate training anymore. Out of the 40 hours, whatever we get funded for the 40 hours, we're going to be able to take care of CPR every other year. On the odd year, we're going to have to come up with some other specialized training to fill that gap, or some other class that they may say you need to fill that gap. So I just listed some of the readiness and preparedness concerns that we have, and then some of the specialized training. So, you know, the police, they go to the full-time police academies for 5.5 months, and the reserves go for 5.5 months part-time. They go 3 nights a week, whereas the full-time officers go all week long. But it's only basics. So after they get out, we're responsible for giving them specialized training. You know, and this on the right is a list of some of those specialized training classes. basic investigator, advanced investigator, interview and interrogation, and so on and so forth. Sexual assaults. They cannot investigate a sexual assault crime or a rape unless they have a certification. They won't be allowed. The court wouldn't allow it. So we have to train police officers and make sure that they provide us with a training certificate that shows they've been trained in that subject before we can allow them to investigate those crimes. We have to respond, being who we are. Part of being a cop is being prepared. We always have to be prepared. It's no different than the military. There's thousands of people on hundreds of bases throughout the United States who may not be actively involved in any kind of war, but they're there because they need to be prepared for war. We're in the same boat. We need to be prepared for anything that comes along. And I know we're a small town, but we are subject to some of these issues. The use of deadly force, that's a huge issue. Response to mass shooters. If we're not prepared for something like that, you see it can happen anywhere. It happened in some little town in Connecticut. So we have to be prepared for those things. Recently, the administration of Narcan, that's kind of a social problem. The opiate drug addiction and the opiate problem is huge today, and not only in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but in the United States and the world. Narcan is a drug that if they overdose, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but if you hit them with the Narcan, you can save their life. It'll take them out of the drug overdose. So the trend is now that police have to carry this and have to administrate it. So we've taken steps to get trained on this and to acquire the Narcan so that we can perform that service. So a list of some of the calls. We're trained. We have to handle several examples. Here's some of the examples of the calls that we go on. We have to be trained to handle all kinds of things. And I won't waste a lot of your time going through the list, but
We understand the challenge that you have. There's
Okay.
clearly a ton of stuff that you need to be trained in.
all right, so we asked for $35,641. That's what we came up with a figure to cover this mandate. The town manager's target was $46,456. The reason that is, we were able to trim off some of the cost by my mistake. I included CPR unwittingly, and an afterthought was, well, we don't need to include it because it's already included in the 40-hour mandate. So that came out. There was another firearms qualification training for some of the trainers that I thought was due this year, and it's not due till next year. So we're able to take that out. We narrowed it down to $36,000. That's where we ended up. And you can see in the firearms qualification request is pretty similar to what the town manager recommended. That's a must. That's twice a year, every year. And that now includes taser training, because we're going to be carrying tasers because we'll be qualified on them this year. And again, I'm just repeating myself. The firearms instructor request was $676. It was like, I think it was up to, it was around $4,000. I don't remember the exact figure. I thought more than one instructor had to be recertified, and I was told it was 40 hours. It turns out it's only 8. I only have one firearm instructor recertifying this year. The town manager didn't recommend to fund that because later on in the process, I realized it has to be this year, not next year, so I'm going to have to take it out of this year's budget. So that's why that's 0. CPR, again, 0. And I also asked for a departmental meeting, and again, this goes along with, more or less along with training. I'm in the process of trying to get the department accredited. I'm going to start with a self-assessment hopefully soon. The department meeting, we use that to update everybody on policies, procedures, memos, in general orders, so that everybody's familiar with it. So it's a training, it's basically a training component. And then it allows us to do some team building exercises. It gives me a chance to go through their personnel files to make sure all the demographic information's updated, make sure all their equipment's accounted for, make sure, like serial numbers on guns match what we gave them, and so on and so forth. But we needed $3,198 to accomplish that. Town manager wasn't able to fund it, so that's why that's 0. Supplies, again, this goes back to the Narcan. We asked to purchase 2 doses, 2 milligrams apiece for each officer. The price was $1,530. That was not funded. I'm not sure why that was. I assume it was because we just couldn't afford it. And we asked to fund the Quick Clot, which is a similar, Quick Clot is something that's used by the military and now by the police very commonly. It's a device that you put on like gunshot wounds or stab wounds that immediately stops bleeding. And it was used over in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's very, very reliable. So now the police are carrying that as well. Example of that, we had somebody chopped up with an axe, and we didn't have Quick Clot at the time. Although the officer was he's actually a retired Marine. He was able to stop the bleeding by packing the wound with all kinds of towels and so forth, where he could have just thrown Quick Clot on it and it would have just stopped. So that's something we're looking for that didn't get funded as well. Under equipment maintenance, you're going to see an additional $3,600, and what that is every time somebody gets hired by the police department, they're required to wear a bulletproof vest. We have a wear policy. They have to wear a bulletproof vest on duty. The Bureau of Justice Assistance offers money for that, but only 50%. So I can apply on an annual basis to try to update our department with bulletproof vests. So this year I needed 8 vests for 8 new officers. So I'm asking for $3,600 because that's 50% of what the Bureau of Justice Assistance is awarding me. And they've already awarded me. I have to purchase the vest before, I believe it's next August. The desk officer, you're going to see that it was originally, we had requested 96. It was originally funded at 96. That was the target. The town manager felt or recommended that it be funded at $70,000, although it was her opinion that it should be funded at 96. And the reason for that is we were running the desk officer from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. This year, we just didn't have the money to do that. We were only able to cover the desk from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. She thought that $96,000 would cover the desk not only Monday through Friday from 7 to 7, but Saturday and Sunday. Some of this, I mean, the desk officer, it's on the screen. I can go into why I think it's necessary and why you should look at funding this 24/7 in the future. That's my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of people share that opinion. But as you can see, it's necessary. I mean, just the calls and the lobby complaints alone, in 35 days, 709 calls, 414 times somebody walked in the lobby. She's, processed 136 lobby complaints herself on the day shift. This isn't including the night shift. I lost the night shift last December because we couldn't fund it. So, at any rate, the town manager thought $96,000 would cover that. And what happens is when we have a desk officer, we're not paying for prisoner watch, because the desk officer's duty is also to walk back to the cell block every 15 minutes and do a suicide check on prisoners. Otherwise, we have to hire an officer on overtime. And sometimes that's a sergeant, or it could be the lieutenant. So hiring the desk officer under the salary admit plan is a lot less money. So if she had funded it for the weekend, Saturday and Sunday is typically when we're holding the lion's share of our prisoners, and that's usually for 20, that could be all weekend. If they get hooked Friday night after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or Friday afternoon after 2, and they're in default or they're not bailable, they're there till Monday morning or Tuesday if Monday's a holiday. So that's Saturday and Sunday, that's 24 hours that we can cover the prisoner watch. That's a huge savings in money. And as a matter of fact, I made a few notes with respect to that before I got here. it's 109, if you covered the whole thing, Monday through Friday, 7 to 7, 7 days a week, it'd be about $119,000 to do that, but you'd save $28,000 just on Saturday and Sunday in prisoner watch fees. So, you know, one complements the other, so to speak. And, you know, you're getting a desk officer, so you're kind of getting more bang for your buck, so to speak. I've also included in the budget, and I'm almost done here. I don't know if you're ready to throw me out yet, but I'm almost done. Again, this year, I'm asking for 3 offices. I'm gonna go on through this real quick, but I know I can justify it. It's not a new request. I even brought this newspaper article's about 8 or 9 years old, and it says, "Chief and union join in push for hiring." So this isn't new. This has been going on for years. As I said, I did a workload analysis to try to justify this, which includes all the call response time, which is a lot of what we do is we use up a lot of manpower, a lot of man-hours responding to calls. And as you can see, there's patrol. We got 104, I guess, miles of road. That's always in question, but I'm going to throw it out there, 104 miles. I've heard 102 and 106.
Number I remember is 90, but
Yeah.
90, 100.
Well, if you include the state highway, I think it's 104. It was 98 or something, but whatever the case may be, it's a lot. And so we spend a lot of time just trying to get out there, and you know, that serves as a great deterrent to crime if we can keep the cars on the road, which doesn't happen a lot of times. You know, when you only have 2 guys on duty a lot of time, a lot of the time. So here's some of the, and you have it in front of you, some of the man-hours that are used up. And as you see at the end, it totals up to 22,957 man-hours a year. And based on what we have in patrol, that's, we only have 21,440 hours, so we're short. You know, that begs the question, well, what do you do? We hire people on overtime. We have to. If we have a major incident and we have people committed, we have to bring other people in. It's just like when somebody books, they arrest somebody, and we've arrested a lot of people this year, so not in the last year. You get 2 guys in the lockup, that's where they're supposed to be. There may not be anybody on the road. And then they got a prisoner to deal with, so what do they do if they gotta go on a call? So if there's no desk officer, they gotta call somebody in to watch the prisoner, and then go take the call. So, you know, again, it all boils down to liability. You know, do we leave the town unprotected and create some kind of libelous situation, or do we, you know, respond to the need? So, this is just a breakdown of what the workload demands are. You know, you can see call response is huge. Yeah, self-explanatory, I guess. I won't spend too much time there. This is where our crimes are this year, and they're going up for some reason this year. And I suppose, you know, we could say there's a lot of reasons for that, but you know, violent crimes up 6% this year. Group A, which is the burglaries and larcenies, forgeries and frauds. Shoplifting's 28%. Narcotics, which accounts for most of it, it's up 63%. Again, that's, you know, again, we're having social issues, as much as I think I alluded to the opiate problem. The Group B crimes, those are the, you know, bad checks, disorderly conduct, that's up 64%. Crime's going up. Calls for service, it doesn't slow down. The town's growing, the world's growing, everybody's growing around us. Calls for service has gone up 35% over the past 5 years. Arrests, 78% over the past 5 years. They don't go down. Average rate of 15%. Average annual rate, 15% increase. Reportable incidents and field interviews, which are pretty much the same. Those are when the police have to do a report and investigate a crime, up 8.3%, 80% over the last 5 years. I threw this cost matrix in here for hiring 3 police officers, just so you know where we came up with the 207,000. It's at, we kind of averaged it out, so we put it at step 2, whereas they probably started step 1. We threw an eve, night, and day, because with, you know, you have to think about shift differentials, holidays, uniforms, ed incentives. We threw in 1 master's, 1 bachelor's, 1 associate's degree. Firearms qualifications, that's extra. So we came up with 207,000 as kind of a midway point. You know, that's kind of gets us near what we need to hire 3 officers. And now the budget, in your narrative, I pointed out, as you can see, where the gaps are, another explanation as to what we asked for and what the gaps were, and I think I covered most of that previously. And then I totaled it up, and then I added the desk office, because the desk office is a separate line item, but because we kind of have autonomy over that position, I just wanted to show it in my narrative, okay?
So where does the desk officer show up in the budget?
It's beyond the fire department in that group, but it's his own line.
Radio watch?
It's his own line
Down here
item,
at the very
yes.
bottom. Oh, in this budget?
Under total police.
So it's after
Yep, I
radio
got it.
watch.
It's actually part of radio watch, the way it's organized.
Right, yeah. But I wanted to include it, as I said, because we kind of have, you know, autonomy over that position. And I just did a breakdown of the budget overall and what the town manager recommended overall, which is $1.4 million. And I won't go into a lot of this. I know we have time constraints, but these are just organizational goals. Obviously, the goal is to expand service, to offer the services that I alluded to in our mission statement, to be able to accomplish our mission. But these are more organizational goals. These are the things I'm trying to work towards, accreditation being one of them, and making all kinds of improvements and trying to expand service. And again, I said this right along, we're trying to get our staff increased. These are some of the reasons why. Again, this is to help us accomplish our mission as a viable police department. So, any questions? I know I tried to go through that as quick as I could.
And that was great. I do have a question, and this is something that we've talked about before, but part of the reason for these public hearings is to get information out to the community about where their budget dollars are going, what we're able to fund, what we're not able to fund, and why. So when we talk about adding additional police officers, the question is, does it have to be 3, or could it be, say, 1 at a time? And how would you phase it in if you were able to get 1 additional police officer as opposed to all 3 at once?
Well, I mean, obviously, the best-case scenarios is if 3 got funded at once, but if we had to do it 1 at a time, obviously, I'm sure, and I don't mean to say that because it's not obvious, but I'd put that person in patrol on a 3 to 11 shift, because that seems to be the busiest shift. Days being second, and then, of course, 11 to 7 being third. So if we did 2, I'd put one on 3 to 11 in days, first of all.
Right.
And then move somebody up to the 11 to 7 shift, as time went on. But it's a very busy shift, and I think it would benefit the most by it right now.
Right. And I think it's important for us to understand where your priorities are. We all know the challenges that we have in meeting the budget that we have this year. So I don't mean to imply that there's room to add an officer. Just wanted to get a sense of where you would do it if we had that opportunity. Other questions from?
I actually have a couple, and some of it may just be my inexperience sitting up here. One of them's around Narcan and just and some of it's the required training that you guys are going through that doesn't seem to be fully funded through this. So the Narcan, it's my understanding that the selectmen have asked you to carry that. but we're not funding it. So I guess I'm confused. I'm confused as to how the town can be asking you to be doing something, but then we're not funding it. So I'm looking for some information on that, and the same thing with the required training. You're required to do some training, but if I remember from flipping through when you were giving I think your presentation was great this year, it doesn't seem like everything's funded. I'm concerned where this money is supposed to, these are mandates. These are things that the state's requiring or we're requiring of you, but we're not giving you the funds to be able to do this.
Well, I mean, what's happened this year, because this initiative comes during this budget, during fiscal 15's budget, that we're going to train in conjunction with the TASER training in a couple of weeks. We were going to do it with defensive tactics, but as I said, we're going to have to put that off till June and try to get that in before the year ends. But we're going to incorporate it with TASER training. The actual training is literally an hour, if that, because all it is a nasal spray. So
Can you fund everything? I guess that's my concern, is that you guys are now going to be expected to fund all this required training, but we're not giving you the money to train what's being asked of you by the state and by the town. I guess I just don't understand how this works. And maybe this is more a question for Carrie or our selectmen. I don't understand it. I don't understand how we can be requiring you to carry Narcan, but we're not paying you to acquire that Narcan. Am I missing something?
Well, you're not missing anything, really. We just, what we're trying to do is, we're trying to make this budget work. And, I'm gonna make the Narcan work one way or the other. I don't care if I have to take it out of, pencils and paper.
I guess my question, would then be turned to the selectmen. Why are we requiring him to carry something that is not in his budget, and we are not budgeting him money to purchase this item? It just sits with me when I sit here and I look through this, and I spent quite a few hours this afternoon going through the entire budget, and when I'm looking at what you're requesting and knowing how important it is to the town, and every year we go through this, every year without fail, somebody stands up at town meeting and asks these questions, and they want to move something out of your budget. They need to understand how important it is, but for us to be sitting here and knowing that our selectmen and our state is requiring something of you, it's not optional, it's not paper and pencil. You shouldn't have to take it from paper and pencil. It should be 100% funded. If they are asking for it, there shouldn't be a recommended. It should be the actual amount that you need in order to provide these services that are being mandated by the state and the selectmen.
Right, well, just in clarification though, Narcan isn't required. I mean, it's just the right thing to do, and I think the selectmen didn't require it, they just agree that it's the right thing to do. And we're gonna try to fund it any way we can, because we might be able to save somebody's life.
Yep.
I put it in next year's budget, but we're gonna try to get it done this year. So, I mean, I don't think I can afford whatever it was, $1,500 for the Narcan. So we're going to have to do something creative. Initially, I wanted to make sure every officer had one. So wherever he was, he'd have one with him. We're not going to be able to do that. So instead of buying 42 milligram doses, I'm going to have to buy a handful of them and make sure, and I'm not sure how we're going to manage this, but make sure they go out the door every time they leave. Make sure it's in the car. And it's one of those things you can't leave in a car, because in this weather, the cold affects it, just like the defibrillator. So somehow, I'm going to have to manage making sure that they get that and take it with them every day. I'm just going to have to get creative to make it work. So it's not like, and that's the discussion we had, I mean, money's tight, okay, where can we save? All right, I'm gonna have to get creative, and I'm gonna have to, somehow make sure that happens. Not sure how I'm gonna do that, because I don't have a supervisor on every shift, so I'm gonna have to rely on these guys to do what they're supposed to do. But, yeah, it's in clarification, it really isn't, that piece isn't a mandate. That piece of what I discussed isn't a mandate, it's just, obviously, we're in the business of saving lives, so we want to make
I just want to
that
make
it
sure you're
happens.
getting everything without having to. I just don't feel like you guys should have to get creative on something. I don't feel like if we're asking you, the state's asking you, whoever's asking you and saying, this is what we want, I don't think it's fair of us to turn to you and say, now get creative and find it in your budget somewhere. It's,
What choice do we have?
I don't know what the choice is, but if we're going to.
The money has to come from somewhere.
It does, but even if it's going to come from somewhere, get creative and put it on the line item in the correct spot to begin with, and not get creative afterwards, and not expect him to have to go back to his office when fiscal year 16 starts and get creative in finding it. I just think it should be on the line item, it should be set from the beginning, and that's my feeling. That's my feeling on it. I mean, he does so much. I just feel like we jump through hoops of fire every year to make these budgets work, and then you guys still go back to your desks, and Chief Sullivan will have to do it as well, I'm sure, and we ask you to get creative. I just don't, we're at the point now we can't get creative. Our budgets are so small. There's nothing left to spread out. We've asked you guys to cut back so much that to not fund something that is needed, I just think it's crazy.
Karen, where's the money going to come from?
I don't know. We've got to start getting.
Those are the decisions we
I
need to
know.
make. If we need to put $3,400 into Narcan, we got to take $3,400 out somewhere
He's going to do it
else.
anyway, though, is what I'm
Exactly.
saying. So I just don't think we should expect him to get
Called an
creative
unfunded
faster.
mandate.
I
We've
understand
been
that.
living with them forever.
I understand.
Since 1972, to be exact.
I know.
when, Not 72, I'm sorry, 1981, when Proposition 2.5 reared its ugly head, we've been living with unfunded mandates, and so, and I've been a police officer since that long and before that. And I remember what happened. It just decimated cities and towns in the Commonwealth, just like it did in California. Proposition 13. So, we have to, I guess we just have to get creative all the time. What I'm up here saying is, and I know there's no money, this is what we need. I know what we need, and I'm not going to stop saying what we need, but somehow, eventually, we're going to have to fund these things. You're right.
Right.
But I guess right now, and I'm doing the best I can, everybody hates the word override, but I'm telling you, I don't know where it's going to come from, but it's going to have to come from somewhere. Because as I said before, and I said at the selectmen's meeting one night, we got the car and it's brand new, but it's got no tires. So what good is it? What good is it?
We need to move on.
Yeah,
Karen,
I'm
you said
sorry.
you had a couple of questions?
Nope, that was it. That's good. Thank you.
Anyone else on the committee? Any questions from the public? Okay. Chief, thank you very much. That was well done.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. You need us? No, I got mine. All right.
And I don't know if it's an appropriate time to do this while they're switching out the technology, but I do also, I'm not sure whether Steve Malandrinos would be the person to ask about this, but I still do believe, and I know I've brought this up a lot, that there should be it would be good to have a page available on the website for budget hearing materials and potentially links to the actual hearings on YouTube for people who can't navigate there easily enough on their own. That would just have the preliminary, the forecasts, all of the materials that the chiefs are presenting tonight, and any other department head will be coming in to present, so that it's all in one place on the website and easy to locate. Do you know, would Steve be the person to talk to about that?
Steve would be.
Okay.
Actually, I can do that if you like. It's sort of consistent with the note taking.
Well, it's not a question of whether I would like, I mean, that's just my recommendation to the board. I don't know if it's the sense of the committee that would be something to do.
Yeah,
Anything that you can do to facilitate the
Get the
transparency
information
of
out there.
town government is a good idea.
I'm glad to hear that, because I was putting links on the minutes for precisely that reason, for the YouTube and also for the Carrie's display. So, why don't I talk to Steve tomorrow if he's in, or Monday?
No, I appreciate that that's a potential possibility, because
Sure, thank you.
there's a lot of information to go through, and it would be really helpful if the public as well had some time to chew through this as well.
Okay, next up, we have the fire department, and Chief Pat Sullivan is with us this evening. Welcome.
Good evening. Obviously, the budget that I'll be presenting, my submitted budget that was on the target budget is at the back of the presentations. Obviously, that's not what I want to be talking about. I'm kind of going back to square one, because that's kind of where we ended up. A little bit about the fire department. We still use the name fire department, but we're really an all hazards response agency. Basically, if it doesn't involve law enforcement, usually it involves us, whether it's fires, hazardous material situations, emergency medical, service calls, assisting the public with lockouts, things like that, cellar pump outs, the occasional cat in a tree. That doesn't happen that often anymore. Plus inspections, things like that. It's pretty much, again, nobody else knows what to do, they call the fire department. So we usually get the call on it. We may not be able to fix the problem, but at least we try to help get the person pointed in the right direction. One thing I've always, made a big deal of is if somebody calls for us, we always send somebody out to check it out. Our operation, there's myself, my administrative assistant, 3 career officer who are EMTs. Those are our 4 full-time personnel. 4 call fire officers, 3 of which are EMTs. 27 call firefighters, 22 of which are also dual-purpose EMTs, and 7 single-role EMTs. We operate 3 engines, 1 ladder truck, 2 brush truck or forestry units, 2 ambulances licensed to the EMT intermediate level, and 4 support units. Our call breakdown, just very quickly, last year we had 1,957 requests for assistance or incidents, 227 fires, hazardous conditions. Those are basically any type of fire incident, hazardous materials, arcing wires, carbon monoxide incidents, anything where there's a potential hazard to life or limb. We had 15 structure fires last year, 7 of which were multiple alarms, which is a high number for us. That's new. Alarm calls are obviously just activated alarms, whether they're fire alarms, carbon monoxide detectors. People don't know what it is. We go out and check those out. Service calls, maybe lockouts, cellar pump outs, assist other government agencies, assist the public. Some of those numbers are the program that we've had, that we've been assisting elderly residents with smoke detectors. Again, EMS and rescue, one of our biggest increases. 914 calls for service there last year. 458 inspections performed by the fire prevention officer. And the other category is general miscellaneous details, things like that. Effectively out of that, we responded to a little over 1,400 incidents that were actually emergency type calls. It's approximately about a 12% increase over last year. It was a significant jump for us last year. As you can see, the breakdown of how the incidents have gone over the last 10 years, we have started to see the increase that myself and my predecessor both predicted was coming with all the development and the housing in town. I think we may be starting to begin to see the first part of that. So some other duties that involve the fire department. We certainly obviously do more than just firefighting. Fire prevention, safety, code enforcement. It's becoming a bigger part of our job as time goes on, especially with all the construction in town and additional requirements from the state. It's handled mostly by my fire prevention officer in the daytime, with assistance from myself and the other career staff. Public education and training, again, a big part of trying to educate people, prevent fires, trying to prevent do some fall safety, things like that with the elderly. And again, obviously administration and support, training, maintenance, emergency management. I'll touch on those again in a little bit. And we've talked about training before. We do quite a bit of training. Most of my guys do it on their own time. The biweekly drills are covered under the payroll usually for about an hour, hour and a half. Beyond that, all the new hire training, the advanced training that you see listed on there, most of that the guys do in their own time. As I always list the example, the basic recruit training for new firefighters is over 300 hours. Basic EMT is around 150 hours. And again, they do that all in their own time. EMTs required to do 48 hours of continuing education every 2 years. And again, usually they're out on their own time on that. We have people that are involved in technical rescue specialties, specialized training. They're involved with regional teams that work around the area. Quite a bit of intensive training on that. It can be upwards of 100 hours on some of that. And again, mostly on their own time. Just a little bit on our grant funding. The grant funding has been kind of drying up for us. We did very well last year. This year, not so much. We were able to get $3,750 EMPG grant, which is emergency preparedness. We were able to replace some of our radio equipment and update some of the emergency management equipment. The other grant, which I'm very happy to see, was the SAFE grant through the state. This was increased this year to $7,200. This is helping our projects doing education in the schools, and the newer part of it is a senior safe that we're going out working with the elderly. We found over the years we've done a very good job educating kids. Unfortunately, that hasn't translated up into older adults, and that's where we're finding a lot of the fire statistics, the injuries, the fatalities are in that age range now, and we're trying to work towards that. The biggest initiative was Captain Reese's program to get smoke and carbon monoxide detectors for seniors in need. And again, we've been working in conjunction with the Senior Center to work on that project. We had applied for a grant to replace all of our automatic external defibrillators. Unfortunately, we did not get that. We do also have a couple other grants in the pipeline, which we have yet to hear on, to try to update and replace some of our equipment. Again, especially at the federal level, as Chief Marino probably mentioned, a lot of these grants seem to be drying up, and they're not as easily available as they were a few years ago. For the budget, again, I've kind of had to go back to square one from the change in the budget. I had sort of thought we had some light at the end of the tunnel for my staffing issues. Unfortunately, we're back to where we were, but I'll touch on some of the numbers here quickly. Again, salary line item that I've proposed, again, this was an increase to cover the bare bones minimum to put per diem staffing of 2 firefighter EMTs 24/7 in the station. The current increase that's proposed in the budget, when I deal with a couple of the other shortages that you see here, allows me to cover about 6 to 7 more 12-hour periods with 2 firefighter EMTs. I can cover a couple more holidays. One of the challenges I have, I've asked for more overtime. Our overtime runs about 10 grand a year more than what we usually have budgeted, so I end up having to move that out from somewhere else. I've asked for an increase to cover that. Also, the duty officer or the weekend on-call officer, we always have one of our officers on call on the weekends, that they're available just to make sure that there's an officer in town and around. If there's any questions, that dispatch needs to contact them on. A few years back, that stipend was increased, but the budget was never increased to cover it. So again, we've had to make that up from somewhere else. I've requested that number to properly fund that. With the increase in the budget, when you take out the increase in the overtime and the increase for the weekend on-call officer, again, it leaves me about $3,000 to cover probably 6 or 7 more shifts. So unfortunately, it doesn't really solve my problem. I think most everybody here has heard me talk about the staffing before, and I'll touch on some of it again. Again, for us, it's a couple of things. Number one, it's response time. Getting out the door, getting somebody there as quickly as possible. I can't emphasize that enough. We're on call nights and weekends. The station is manned 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. Nights and weekends, the station is unmanned. We're all on call. We all have the pagers. Call firefighters and the career people if they're available. We all respond back in when there's a call. It depends on what the nature of the call is, whether we're calling in 1 or 2 people or we're calling in all 40 some odd. Again, big incident, we call a lot of people. We sort of tier that out. But again, they have to respond from wherever they are, come to the station, pick up the apparatus, and respond to the call. Takes time, and we'll talk about that again in a minute. Just some of these definitions, when we've talked about this. Dispatch time is the time required to get the call processed at the dispatch center to notify the emergency units. Again, not much we can do about that. That's being handled on their end. The turnout time is the time from the time the tone goes off till we get the wheels turning, and then the response time is the wheels turning to arrival at scene. Under the NFPA standards, The goal is to have somebody on scene in 4 minutes or less than 4 minutes, and the bulk of your company's responding, or in the case of an ambulance call, an advanced life support unit there, less than 8 minutes. And they recommend that you should be able to hit this 90% of the time. This is a map, some of you have probably seen that before, of, that's the area from our station approximately that you can respond to in 4 minutes. Again, there's only so much we can do about that without having multiple manned fire stations. You can only do so much. But again, we can't make up time once we're on the road. The only place where we can make up time is to have somebody in the station to be able to get that unit responding right away. Just to kind of give you an idea of where we are, again, turnout time, the target time is a minute or less. Right now, we use our average time at a times, I took a sample of 2 months' time, since you have to do that by hand, and trust me, it's very painful to do that. Manned, it's an average of about 1 minute and 41 seconds. When we're not staffed, it's an average of 4 minutes and 45 seconds. Which, this graph here will probably give you a better idea of that. The red dots are the times that we're unstaffed, and the blue dots are when the station is staffed. You can see, if I can find the right note here. Virtually all the times were under 4 minutes when we were staffed. As you can see, there was at least one that was out to 16 minutes. I believe that was a service call, but you can see the time frame of where we are when we're unstaffed versus staffed. And again, this is the important, the first part of this is the response time that I've harped on. This kind of gives you a breakdown of the runs by time of day. This includes inspections, so that's going to show partly why we are busier during the daytime. The other challenge, again, during the daytime is most of our call firefighters work out of town. The days gone past, the 25, 30, 40 years ago when everybody worked in town, half of our call guys worked for the town, or they worked in town, are gone. Most everybody works out of town. So I have very few call firefighters available, so we're handling that more with the day staff. The hard call coverage is our system of paying a stipend to 2 of our EMTs to be on call to guarantee that we have somebody available for the ambulance. And this just shows the percentage of each day or shift that is covered over the 3-year period that I could go back and track the statistics on that. Again, the main thing it shows, we have the toughest time covering weekends. I think probably most of you probably found, I don't know if your lives are any busier or easier than they were 20 years ago. I know mine isn't. The days of people spending weekends at home, sitting around, are kind of gone now. I think probably most of you find you travel a lot, people are busier a lot, people are out of town a lot. So we try to keep this system of keeping a couple EMTs available so we always know we can get the ambulance out. Again, they're not in the station, they're just being paid to be available. So they may be in the station, or they may be living, like me, living down on Shirley Reservoir. So it may take them 6 or 7 minutes to get to the station, to get that out. We'd had some problems a while ago. We took some actions to boost this up a little bit. But again, we're struggling, especially the last few weeks with the storms. Everybody's tired, people aren't around. Again, on an average, we cover 80 to 90% of the shifts. But the other times when one of those shifts isn't covered, we put the tone out and we cross our fingers that somebody's around to respond. This just kind of shows you how they're broken down by month over the last 3 years. And again, you can see usually summer and to an extent fall are the hardest times because, again, people are traveling. They're out of town. They're gone. Again, the reason we hype the response time on the EMS side, in the case of a cardiac arrest, a person's chance of survival decreases about 10% for every minute that they're not receiving CPR and advanced care. Everybody saw an example of that here last fall. The system worked the way it should have. We were fortunate that we had people around. Again, those people in the station, they were able to respond immediately. That's not always the case. We have people coming in from a further distance. The second thing, on your advice, I left the video out after having fun trying to get that to work. Again, the important thing to take out of this, a fire doubles in size every minute. Fires grow exponentially faster than they used to 40 years ago. There's a video that's excellent. If anybody watches Channel 9 on cable TV, we did do a show on fire safety. That video is part of it. And it gives you an idea of just how quickly a fire grows with modern fuels versus what Hollywood makes you think of what fires were like 40 years ago, and realize why it's so important to be able to get an immediate response. What we've talked about, or what I've asked for, even just the basic per diem coverage of 2 firefighter EMTs in the station would allow us just to get the first unit on the road, either the ambulance or the first fire engine. Again, that's a fire engine with only 2 guys on it. Hopefully some of the call guys are going to meet them there. This in no way would take the place of our call fire department. We need them just as much as we ever do. The idea of having this would number one, decrease our response times, and also take some of the load off the call firefighters. We've gotten busier and busier. As you saw in the chart, we've picked up an increasing call volume. It's getting harder and harder for call people in their busy lives to be able to deal with everything else with 1, 2 jobs, deal with family commitments, and respond to these calls. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is it's getting harder and harder to get people and retain people with that. The last year, we put 4 new call firefighters and EMTs on. In that same time frame, I've lost 7. 2 of which were 2 of the ones that we put on. Some because they moved out of town, some because they just found it's more of a commitment than they can handle. It's getting harder and harder to find the people that can do that. And fortunately or unfortunately, the people we get now aren't ones that so much that live in the community, they want to be part of the community. We're finding it's more younger people, they're looking to make it a career now. The old days, you had a lot more people that were older people, they just wanted to do it because it was something to do for the community. It's sort of a different demographic now. The other challenge I find with my younger call firefighters is it's harder for them to live in town. And that I'm losing more and more that are starting to move a further distance away because they can't find a place to live in town as they get older. On the other expense line item, I really have not requested any major changes except for my EMS supplies. This is something that's got cut back to $6,000 several years ago. Every year, we find that we're over in that, and I'm taking money out of replacement equipment for firefighting equipment and other line items to make up the difference. So again, I've asked for an additional $4,000 to make up that difference in the EMS supplies to keep the ambulances stocked, keep the equipment there. Years ago, we were able to get a lot of our equipment from the hospitals. Like everybody else, they've had to cut their costs, and one of the first things they cut was being able to supply equipment back to us on the EMS side. The other place where I've requested, and you'll see this in the DPW budget, is vehicle maintenance. As you're well aware, vehicle maintenance has not been a fun thing for me this year. I've requested an additional $5,000 above target to cover costs. Again, my equipment fleet is aging. Hopefully we'll get the new truck in right now. I'm told it's due in the end of May. But as equipment ages, we find more repairs that we have to make on it. Like anything else, the older it gets, the more care it needs. We've seen some cost savings we've started working with the DPW and with the DPW mechanic. He's been able to do some of the work for us. The challenges we find there is, A, he's one man. At one time, they had 1.5, or a mechanic and an assistant down there. Now they only have 1 mechanic. Plus, he has to maintain their fleet and the police fleet. Many of my repairs have to be sent out because either A, they're more complex than what they can repair, or because they're backed up on workload. I can't afford to have one of the frontline emergency vehicles down for any great length of time, so a lot of times I have to farm it out or send it out to a repair facility to get it done, just for the timeliness of getting it back in service. So again, I've asked for somewhat of an increase on that. And again, this goes back to, we've talked about the apparatus, what we have for the fleet. You're all aware of the apparatus replacement cycle. I know there's been discussion about trying to pay off the first engine before we start looking at replacing anything else. I understand that. Unfortunately, it still doesn't change that the trucks are getting older and the wear and tear comes down. As an example, as I told you, we had to put almost $5,000 into engine 4 this year. The part of that doesn't come along with that is the 2.5 to 3 weeks that it was out of service and unavailable, trying to get those repairs accomplished on it. The same with the ladder truck. When that was down, we lost that for about 5 days as well. Fortunately, we didn't need it. The ambulance was out of commission for almost a week with the repairs that were being made on that. So it has an impact, and again, with the vehicles older, they're emergency vehicles. The one thing you don't want to do is cross your fingers every time you hit the start button that it's going to start and try, and not fail going down the road. And we touched a little bit, just, these are the rough life cycles that are expected for emergency vehicles. Again, they're a 20 to 30-year investment, depending on the unit. The ambulances and the support vehicles, again, see a lot more wear and tear. We usually anticipate a little bit shorter life cycle on those. The impact of the level-funded budget, as it is right now for us, again, the response times are going to continue to be longer. There's an increased chance of death or injury or more severe damage to property. Is it any different than it is today? No. We're no worse off, but we're also no better off either. Decreased coverage on the holidays and holiday weekends. Again, we try to cover with per diem staff on some of the holidays because, again, not as many people are around home on holidays anymore. We find we have more people out of town. And to try to give a little bit of a respite for some of the call people, we try to put somebody in the station to make sure someone can respond. We're finding it's getting harder and harder to cover some of those weekends just because we don't have the funding. And again, we talked about the ambulance supplies. We end up having to rob Peter to pay Paul in the budget from other places to make sure we were able to keep keep those units supplied. Obviously, if the priorities of funding was more available, increased staffing to provide 24/7 coverage in the station with 2 firefighter EMTs. When the staffing is always mentioned, it's always mentioned as ambulance coverage, and yes, that's the majority of our calls. But it's also fire coverage. It provides at least a couple firefighters to get that first engine on the road immediately and hopefully get them to the scene before the situation gets out of control, and maybe they can make a difference on that. The per diem coverage, as I think we mentioned before, we envisioned that as a 4 to 5 year fix, until money is available to start putting more career coverage in there. This nearby community of Townsend uses per diem staffing on their ambulance. It's worked for them for several years, but now they're running into the point that they're having trouble even filling some of those shifts and that versus having dedicated permanent personnel in the station. And even at that level, it would still be 2 people with the call people backing them up. And of course, the second thing is increasing the salary and EMS expense lines to cover the actual costs of providing service. The overtime and the duty officer, we've shown consistently where those numbers are every year, and unfortunately, we end up moving money out of the budget somewhere else to cover them because they're there. The overtime for my career staff is almost exclusively callback and occasional storm coverage. With their shifts, they really don't cover each other's schedules. We usually do that with per diem. If there's somebody on vacation or out sick, that's really all callback. And I can't tell them to stay home. I need them to respond along with everybody else. Again, we've seen an increase in our call volume. We're making it work, but the rubber band is getting stretched thin. This is, I think, my 3rd presentation to you folks, and I've always said I know the money is tight, but it's getting to be more of a strain for our people to try to keep the people available and make sure that we can get the job done. I mean, people complain to me occasionally about response times, that how long it took somebody to get there, and my answer is we do the best we can with what we've got. Unfortunately, we're getting to the point that our best may not be good enough anymore, and I'm just really concerned that before something bad happens. As I said, we had an example of things working right, and I would hope that we can continue to do that and not be discussing a tragedy because we had trouble getting something out. And I don't like to sit there and sound alarmist over anything like that, but we are getting busier, and it's getting more of a strain on a part-time system. The only other point that I would make, or observation that I would make, and I don't begrudge Chief Marino, he has his concerns and his workload is increased. He does have full-time coverage. We still do not. And like I said, I don't begrudge him his help. He needs that help. I've seen it. He needs the desk coverage. But we're still covering the majority of our time with part-time help. And I think it's really getting to the point that we need somebody in there all the time. It's interesting, too, as a final note, that I found some articles about back when we took over the ambulance service in 1969, when they were doing about 150 calls a year. And there was a strong push then to put coverage in the station. And it didn't happen then. That was 40-some-odd years ago. Does anyone have any questions?
Actually, I do. First of all, I have a comment. It's very clear where your priorities are. And I know we had hoped that we would be able to fund that, and when the revenue numbers came in, it just became impossible. But I do have a couple of questions as well. Going back to the responses by year, the one that's trending up most significantly is the EMS and medical. How much of that do you think is due to the aging population within town?
A fair amount.
So this is something that's likely to continue
I would
as we continue
Yep.
to age.
I would say that, I think I'm trying to remember the quote from Doreen from the senior center, that 25 or 33% of the population was considered over 65, I believe, in town.
I think it was over 60,
It was
33%.
Maybe over 60. I know it was a significant number, and yes, we see that. We see sicker people that are at home, that people that, due to the advances in medicine, 20-some-odd years ago or 30 years ago, they never would survive to be home, but now they're home in sicker conditions, and again, requiring more assistance. I think we also see some that we've had a significant increase in calls for lift assists, that people have fallen and they don't have family to help them up, or they have a spouse who's as elderly and can't help them, and again, they don't know who to call, so they call us, and we go and help get them up, make sure they're not hurt. Occasionally they are hurt, and we take them to the hospital, but we find we're the stop when they can't get anybody else to help them.
Right. My other question might actually be more of a suggestion, but I'd be curious what the runs by time of day would look like if you took the inspections out.
I could work on that. It's not, the way the system is, it's not easy to pull that out. I think you'll find they still seem to go about the same way, because you see a lot of the service calls, especially like assisting, the elderly calls, and that, they go on during the daytime. And like anything else, things are slower at night, but I've seen nights that we've been out 3 and 4 times in the middle of the night.
Right.
The fun part with our job is you can't predict anything. You can go by statistics and kind of guess, but we have to be just as ready at 2 a.m. as 2 p.m. because you just don't know what's coming along. I've seen 2 or 3 back-to-back ambulance calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. So,
Other questions?
So, and it might be in here and I just haven't dug deep enough. Cost-wise, on calling in somebody after hours, do you have a total of what that's cost you this past year?
well, it's basically, that's my budget, because of the primary, after hours, it's the call guys, and then occasionally the career staff when they come in. I get a few call firefighters during the daytime, but it's not a huge amount. I mean, a call firefighter makes anywhere from, or EMT makes anywhere from about $15 an hour to $22 an hour, depending on.
And do they get more when they have to be called in versus?
The career staff get overtime.
Okay.
They're on a 2-hour minimum overtime when they get recalled. The call guys, it's all an hour minimum, whether it's day, night, whenever. They get, and then it's a half an hour, it goes by the half hour after that. So, we average most ambulance calls. I can remember the days when I started, we had 6 people on an ambulance call. Now it's usually 2, because it's just the frequency of how many calls there are.
John, I think you had a question?
I had one question on the same chart that Mark just asked about responses by year. You look at the EMS and medical, it looks like it's a fairly level trend until 2013. Then it goes up by, looks like roughly 150 runs. Similarly, in the fires and hazards line, fairly level trend until 2013. 2013 and 14, you've got another extra 150 runs. A little less than 1 run per day. So the question is, aging population, could it also be the development in town?
would say some of that is development. I haven't broken them out by it's sort of difficult to break them out to single out a particular development, but, I mean, we've seen the development starting since, 2008, 2007, and we've all been predicting it, and we're starting to see it. For the first few years, we didn't respond to some of the large, the condo complexes or the apartment buildings. Now we're starting to see more calls there. So yeah, some of that could be that. And honestly, some of it from 2013 is probably, I think some of the calls were distributed a little bit differently or broken up into different categories. I took over in 2012, so I've sort of been doing them the same way every time when I do the stats. So that may have had a slight factor on it, but it doesn't affect the bottom number of total incidents.
Does this include nuisance or erroneous calls?
We don't really get many false, I mean, we classify by our coding, like a fire alarm that went off, it may be classified as a false alarm, but it was due to a malfunction. That happens. I mean, as far as malicious false alarms, like, somebody going and pulling a fire alarm box, no. There's very few of those. We get a lot of ones that can be what we call a good intent call. Somebody calls up, they say, well, I think my neighbor's house is on fire. Well, they actually saw the barbecue grill reflecting through the window. We don't know that until we get there. And that's usually, that falls in usually under the service calls or hazardous conditions.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else?
No, I'm fine, but I would probably say that when we do post information on the website, the other link that would be helpful would be to it is a good video, and
Yes.
and it was, the recommendation really had more to do with, because there was the technical glitch, but it is a good video, and it would be helpful for people to see that as part of the budget
I can
presentation.
forward you the link, because the video itself is on YouTube.
Right.
You don't have to watch myself and Lieutenant Bursch try to do the other presentation. We're not getting any calls from the Screen Actors Guild.
Any questions from the public? Okay. Okay,
All
Chief
right,
Sullivan,
thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Well done. Okay. I'm going to take a minute under budget opportunities to talk a little bit about our process. But we're up to date on minutes. We had a meeting on Tuesday, so obviously those minutes are not ready yet.
Very welcome news. They're not ready yet.
Okay. And since we just met Tuesday, we did our committee and department updates. I'll just ask if anyone has anything to add.
No.
No?
The only one, the PAC committee had a meeting yesterday. It was excellent. They're working on rounding out the 2015, fiscal 2015 budget numbers, because they hadn't met before now, really. And they're going to be working on 2016 budget shortly. But excellent meeting. That's it.
Okay. Under budget opportunities, I want to take just a minute to talk a little bit about our process. I think, Karen, you have a great passion for the issue that we just talked about with the Narcan. The reality is that if we have a new line in the budget, that we have to cover that money somewhere. We can either take some of the new revenues that are coming in and apply it to that line item, or we can take money away from an existing line item and move it to that. But part of the charge of this committee is to actually make some of those recommendations. So if we think Narcan is more important than something else, then that's a recommendation we need to make. And as we go through these hearings, it's important for us to flush out as much information as we can so that we make an informed recommendation as to what we as a group thinks makes the most sense. We're going to have challenges with every department. We're going to hear from well, I don't have the exact schedule in front of me, but our next meeting is next Thursday. That's a special meeting. We have departments coming in to present their budget view. In fact, I think we may, let me get the schedule. So next week, we have the library, hopefully, they haven't confirmed yet, but we have Lunenburg Public Schools. And we know that the school committee is recommending a 9% increase in their budget. That will be an interesting presentation. We're trying to reschedule the Council on Aging, and we might get them in next week. On March 12th, we expect to hear from the Sewer Enterprise and the DPW. On March 19th, we have the PAC and other moneyed articles, and we're trying to schedule Monty Tech. And then on Thursday, March 26th, we'll wrap up the process with a summation from the town manager, and then an open discussion about what we think the right trade-offs are and what our recommendations will be as a committee. And that will take the form of the budget letter that accompanies the warrant. Does that all make sense?
It does. Does our charter extend to suggesting alternative ways of funding things?
Can you provide an example?
Yeah. Just occurred to me, and this is very half-baked, Narcan. Could it be a situation where there is similar to the user fee for ambulance, a user fee for Narcan? There may be an opportunity with medical insurance to use that to preempt a longer-term condition. It's costlier. Don't know. But if that's in our charter, we could pursue that.
Yeah, again, it's in our charter to recommend.
Yeah, that's what
So
I mean.
we can certainly recommend looking into what it would take to put a user fee in place, how feasible might it be,
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
Yeah. okay,
Yeah.
good.
That's a great example. Other thoughts, either on the budget as a whole or the process that we're going through to try and come to a consensus? Okay. I just went through the next meeting schedule. Do we have a comment from the public? Sure, please. If you would, Carl, just introduce yourself. You know the drill.
Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. I just have a request as a taxpayer in looking at these budgets and these requests and things of whenever an entity requests additional people, adding people to the town's payrolls. And I thought the chief did a nice job of saying, what the costs were. However, those are not all the costs. And we never get visibility to really all of the costs that the town is committing to when they bring someone on board. So I guess I'm just requesting, could we get information when there seriously is being entertained adding staff to the town, that we get the total cost, or in my prior life, the total life cycle cost, right? I never get to see what insurance is, what retirement benefits, what the total liability of the town is taking on. So we only see a piece of the cost, and that is bad enough, but but I'm afraid it's not really some of the biggest part of the cost, which is retirement. So it's just a request. I'd love to see the entire cost when somebody wants to add to the town's payroll. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great idea. Anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. Any discussion? Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? None. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.